A tear in the sky like a wound of starlight splits over Middle-earth, and from another cosmos strides a titan with iron will and a purpose older than kings, to forge order by any means. Where he plants his gauntlet, the land grows silent where he forges. The very songs of the Eldar tremble. At first men of the north mistake it for a sign of war fishermen in the mouths of the Anduin, say the sea itself is pierced shepherds on the long-lit hills of Rivanion keep their hands upon their swords and their prayers in their mouths. But the elders of the wood and the deep do not speak of war alone when such a rending is not of arrow or of thunder. The Eldar listen, and the Valinor hears. For the world is woven with music, and the mesh that binds it trembles before a new hand. From the scar in the firmament comes no elvish light, and no flame of Valinor. It is a cold, hard brightness that smells of iron and of oceans not our own. He steps as one beyond, telling his armor is like a fallen star wrought into metal. And upon his left hand there sits a gauntlet, ancient and new, ringed about with sockets like the mouths of planets. He smells of dust and of 1,000 winters. His eyes are steady and terrible, and when he breathes the air of Middle-earth seems thinner, as though some great hunger draws the soft music out of the hills. Word goes on wind and root and river. A stranger has come, not of the kind we count as Maya nor of the blood of Arda, but something older in its making, an engine of will from a sky where stars die to be forced into laws. For long ages, the valor set the bounds and the circles of the world, and the rings of power were born from a different cunning. The subtler craft of the Eldar and the darker wit of men. This new forge is not smithcraft alone, but a bending of fate to purpose. He sets his feet in the shadows of Orodruin. He has come not by friendship with the dark, but by the geometry of dominion, and there beneath the smoking throat of the mountain, he lays down tools not of this making. The dwarves feel the heat and wake, for their halls sleep always half in fires kept by kinship with stone kin of Durin, speak in their runes of new throes in the world, and of metal singing an alien note. Elves far and near hear it too, a discord at the edge of the music, a tone they have no name for. Galadriel first dreams of a hand like a mountain, stern and unyielding, not seeking beauty but the stilling of choice. Elrond feels a shiver in the council chambers of Rivendell, as if a page in the great book turns without a hand to turn it. He sends riddling words to the west and north, summoning kin and friend to learn whether this thing is new or a shadow of a known malice. Sauron in the east laughs or snarls. His eye is old and keen, and he tastes like smoke the sense of competition. A rival to the making of rings is an affront he both despises and envies, for rings are speech in which he is fluent. But the stranger does not come to parley. He comes armed with a doctrine wrought in cosmic iron. That balance will be found by reducing will to law, by binding the random choices of sapience to a single, unbroken will. In the caverns beneath the mountain, he sets up a forge, not like the forges of men or dwarves, but a pattern of rings and coals, and devices that hum with a light the Eldar cannot name. He calls to metal like a master calling to apprentices. Molten iron takes a different song beneath his hand. The 100 tongues of mountains answer, and a ring grows of a metal unfamiliar and terrible, warm with a will that is not born of Arda but persuades Arda to its laws. He places upon it motifs he learns by watching the long dances of power in this world. The flight of an eye, the crown of a king, a ring of fire, and yet he stamps upon it symbols of his own calculus, geometric and cruel, as if the sea itself were to be bound by equations. Around him lesser things gather, a strange fellowship of outcasts, a mercenary throng of men who think to win their own thrones by his strange bargains, a smith of Numenor lost in time who hears in the stranger's speech the echo of a given destiny. Legends pass like quicksilver through the courts of Mirkwood and Lorien, Some say that this is a Maya come to mend the world. Others murmur that he is a demon taking shape of a lawful god. Few name him by the speech of distant lands. They give him names enough Galadriel sends her gaze and finds the ring half-born. A circle of cold fire that does not sing in the tongue of the valor, but speaks in the blunt grammar of dominance. She sees its consequence as in a mirror. Chains upon choices, the soft extinguishing of dissent, the smoothing of the living into a single motion. She is old and patient and terrible in her patience, yet she raises a voice like a bell across the woods, calling to Elrond, to Celeborn, to those who remember the old crafts and the old bargains, to the wise of the West. Elrond rides the rivers in a dream, and wakes his folk men gather in whispers at Bree, and in the ruins of Arnor, wondering if a new king will rise to bind or to free them. The Dunedain speak of oaths, and of the doom of kingship that bends beneath a ring. Sauron eyes the forge with the old hunger, and knows that a ring not wrought for his dominion is but a bell that tolls to warn him of a rival. He sends forth spies and whispers, shaping lies into instruments, for in the arts of deception he is master. Yet the stranger is not blind to such counsel. He reads the slow histories written in the bending of stone, and the falling of leaf. He uses treaty and terror with equal hand, promising the uncertain men the relief of order, and offering gold and titles to hearts that hunger. There are whispers of those who will bend as seasons bend, who will trade the reckless freedom of choice for a sure law. And there are those who will not, for choice is the marrow of the free peoples, and some hearts beat stubborn as stone dot in the deep of night. Galadriel walks by the mirror and looks upon possibilities some have never seen. She speaks to Celeborn in words older than any treaty, and says that this thing is like a plow that will not be turned from its furrow once it bites soil. Far beyond, in the hidden havens, the Maiar stir. Few of them know this stranger's name, and fewer still understand the calculus of his will. Yet delicate threads of fate shiver as the ring is hammered, and the Ainur feel a new strain in the music. The people of Gorgoroth sense a foreign hand in their fires, and whisper that the mountain is crowded. The orcs sniff a scent of command they do not know, and for a while they hesitate as if a new master might reward them. Around the forge, the very light seems to stain the air with something that looks like law. It is as if a script of inevitability is being hammered into the world. The ring sings in a low voice that is not music to elven ears, a syllable of will. And when it comes to naming, Thanos of another world, for even in the tongues of Middle-earth he will bear that sound, gives the ring a word not soft but inevitable, a name that tastes like iron. He does not speak it aloud, for the land to catch names in this world are seeds, and he is careful with sowing. Yet secrets leak as all things do. Last from the borders of Rohan spies smoke through a sky that was once silver with stars, and tells of a ring wrought in a mountain. A dwarf in the deep hears a cadence of brass and remembers an oath. The song spreads, and with it stirring of arms and counsel. Across ridges and waters the peoples puzzle and prepare, for even if they do not yet know the stranger's end, they feel the world shifting its weight toward a new gravity. Thus is the stage set, thus the hammer falls. He stood within the hollow of the mountain as one who stands in the heart of the sun. The forge that he had raised was not of stone alone, but of intent, a cavern hammered by will, its ribs of iron and fire grown from the bones of the world. Winds leapt like hounds outside the mouths of the deep, and the sky itself seemed to bend and listen. In that black forge the Titan worked, and his work was like a doom song in the making. Flames older than the memory of men wrapped his hands in light, and did not consume him. Heat curdled the air, and made the very rock weep. For he wrought not merely metal, but a thing of compulsion, a circlet of rule to be called by no name that the Eldar might bless. The ring took shape like a pledge tightened upon fate. It was not fashioned by ordinary smithcraft. He drew from the hidden veins of the earth, veins that once fed the primeval fires under the feet of the first mountains. And he called upon powers not of Arda. Strange stones came to him, gems that bore an inner darkness as if they were star splinters fallen by the hand of some other sky. He set them into the molten circlet, and each stone hummed with a voice not heard in these lands since the forging of the sun and moon. When he hammered, the blows fell like sentences. Each strike was a binding, each cooling breath, a law. There were portents in the world. The Eldar felt them on their roads of song, ripples across their seeing that spoke of a new dominion. In wood and fen and plain the birds stilled, and where once deer had grazed they fled, nostrils quivering with a scent of change, with the iron tang of a coming lord. The sea cast up odd things upon its shore, gleaming fragments that matched the stones in the Titan's hand, as if some hidden current had carried away a shard of another cosmos to lie upon Middle-earth. Deep places dreamed and dreamt wrongly, the dwarves muttered in their halls, for in the sound of the hammering far beneath a resonance answered them like kin of. Such works the wise are never silent. The Astari, those strange messengers clothed in language and counsel, felt a gravity in the world that tugged at their robes and at the strings of their purpose. Gandalf perceived a shadow in the way smoke begins to gather, not yet full night, but a gathering of clouds that would soon pour. Saruman, sitting amid his many devices, heard it as a challenge and a curiosity where a ring might be forged, he thought, power might be learned. He took counsel with himself and with no other. Radagast, who walks with beasts, saw how the beasts shunned paths and gathered like a chorus to tell of ill things and unseasonable hunger. The White Council met as whispers along the branches of great trees, and in their meeting the axes of the dwarves and the songs of the Eldar came like threads to their loom. Yet the presence that drew most truly to the glow of that furnace was not one who sought counsel. It was one who would answer force with force. For in Thanos there was a purpose as fixed as the turning of the sky. The news went from ear to ear as smoke from a lightning-struck pine. There is a maker at the mountain, he works with a will that is not of Elendil nor of the valor. Men, who stand betwixt the ages and the bones of kings, heard the murmurs in their taverns and in the courts of small lords. Rangers saw tracks where none had been before, horns were lifted in alarm from the peaks. The folk of the marshes let their lamps burn long into night. Among Dunedain, there was a sharpening of blades and a loading of quiver. In the halls of the north and the south the word moved like a shadow passing a candle. Old prophecies, half remembered in stone and in the sky, shifted their meanings when read by trembling hands. That the world would once more be tried by rings was a thought that made even the sturdiest heart quicken. Sauron, who was fallen or fled, ever a presence in the lands like a root, felt the tremor as another might feel a hand upon his shoulder. He sent his spies, and the Nazgul smelt a new scent upon the air, a scent not wholly of shadow, but of a law pressed hard with iron. The Lord of the Rings, who had once disguised himself in fair speech, perceived the possibility of another lord's dominion, and in darkness his envy flared like oil upon flame. If a ring could be made to bind wills, then another ring might be seized or shattered, and the balance of doom might be tilted. He marshaled his servants, listened to their reports, and for the first time in ages his agenda crossed with a fate foreign to him. There was a hand from beyond meddling with the very thing that had once been his instrument. Yet there were those who did not come to the mountain with sword or shadow. Galadriel, whose sight runs like clear water into hidden pools, felt the coming as a door opening in a house she had known by heart. She saw the Titan at his work as a watcher sees the horizon catch light, and in her heart she weighed the weight of this new thing. It was not only power that she saw, but method, a cold arithmetic of balance and loss, a tallying that would count life as a coin. That thought made her sorrow like an old wound. She sent not armies to the forge, but a message borne on thought, to the folk of the woods, to the high elves, and to those who still kept watch in the gray havens, a calling that said, "Come see, and fear what must not be named." Her voice was like a wind that reminds one of sea roads, and its echo made corners of the earth hold their breath. There were others who thought to use the new ring for ends noble and for ends cruel, and in such thinking lies the first crack of ruin. Men spoke quietly in towers of trading with the maker, of bargains to win the ring's favor in exchange for lands or for heirs. Dwarves considered whether it would bring wealth beyond counting to the forges, and whether such gold would be worth a chain upon spirit. The wise of the Eldar argued that no. Gaining of the world that could be had by binding another would be true gain. Elrond's counsel, spoken with the patience of one who has watched many suns, was to beware the tempter who hammers with celestial tools. But when men and dwarves and elves spoke in their tongues, there were those who listened in other shapes, servants of Sauron, traders of secrets, and the ever-present merchants of blood. The Titan's purpose was not swayed by petitions or by the subtle pleading of small gods. His reason was a geometrical thing, and in that geometry the ring had to be absolute. He did not crave adulation as a petty lord does, neither did he care for the tales of bards. He sought balance in the force of will, a harmony through subtraction and subtraction's finality. He had studied the lives of many worlds, and in them he had set his judgment like a scale. Where there was overabundance of suffering or of vice, he would cut. Where there was overreach, he would trim. Where the currents ran too wild, he would dam them. Thus he hammered, and each stroke sounded not simply upon metal, but upon the hearts of the peoples of Middle-earth like a bell tolling for a world yet unmade. And yet he was not alone in the flame. There came to his side an unlikely fellowship of mechanics and minds, creatures from beyond the circles who saw in brass and flame, a kinship smiths of legend, whose eyes had been set like flint by some other fire, a few of the fallen who traded their trust for knowledge, not dreaming how absolute the bargain would be. Among them walked a cunning that learned the tongues of the Eldar and the histories of Numenor as if to consult an old book. They taught the Titan the runes that bind and unbind, the subtle inscriptions that make a ring more than a ring. In return, he taught them the calculus of inevitables, and they felt the cold comfort of certainty. It was not a forging without contest. In the deep places of the mountains small rebellions arose, for even the most cunning craft can be undone by cunning in turn. A dwarf, a master of the secret shapes of alloy and the whispering of fire, slipped down from his ledge in the night with a single sharp thing and sought to mar the work. He believed in his kind's old pride, that no other's hand should make a thing to rule all. His blade sang upon the furnace and was for a moment a note of courage. But the Titan's shadow was long, and wisdom of ages older than men moved him. He turned not to wrath but to remedy. With a gesture like a law made real, he bound the mind of the dwarf not in chains of iron, but in iron of will. The dwarf remembered hearth and craft and stayed his hand, only to find his own desire given other shape. Thus did Thanos make friends of foes by the simplest rule he obeyed, that every force might be met and bent until it yielded to the measure he conceived as right. The world drew nearer to a tipping point. Wheels within wheels cranked by unseen hands, the Nazgul passed beyond the shadowed plains and cried to the moon for tidings. From the north came a host of men who had not yet given their names to songs. They rode like wind through the mountain passes and paused upon the ridges to cast their eyes toward the glow. The elves made ready not to barge in with sword and song, but to stand as watchers upon the threads of fate, and not to let the world be cobbled into an answer it had not asked for. From the south, men of Gondor tightened their shield chains and sharpened their spears. Rumor was as fuel rumor as tinder took flame. There were lanterns lit from the gray havens to the lonely lands where eagles keep watch, and the word of the forge became a flame in winter nights. Yet even as alliances were birthed in whispered rooms and midnight councils, the Titan at his anvil completed a final touch. He inscribed upon the ring a design not of any single language, but a script folded from geometry and the cold, precise memetics of his origin. It would be read not with the eye alone, but by the will that bore it. When at last the circlet cooled and the stones within it sang a single note, the ring was shown to the world like a new star falling into the sea. A hush fell across entire valleys, fountains froze in mid-spray. A shepherd stopped his song and listened, though he had no ear for such marvels. The ring hung there upon a stone like a sunless sun, and the Titan lifted it as an arbiter lifts scales. It is a dangerous thing to lift judgment in a world already fat with sorrow. In the silence that followed, the Titan listened for the world's acceptance or its recoil. There were voices that rose, cries of despair and of hope, bargaining and prayer, the whisper of treachery and the sob of those who would be counted. The ring's presence made men confess and make bargains with their shadows, for in the glare of a new absolute, choices are sharpened. The lands waited, gaping as if a great beast might awaken, and in the great hush, the web of alliances tightened into a snare. Old powers, jealous rulers, and the secret bones of the earth took their places as pieces upon a board, whose rules were not yet written. So the forging ended, and the true work began. What is made in fire cannot be unmade by nightfall alone. It takes ages for a new law to enter the bones of the world. The Titan took his ring and placed it upon a finger that had never worn ease nor absolution. He looked upon the map of Middle-earth as one might look upon a book to be edited, and he began to move. Where his will touched, men felt the world change. Where his foot fell, paths bent. The small reckonings of villages and the great machinations of empires alike began to turn to face this stranger and his law. Thus commenced a time in which histories would be tracked in two kinds of measure, the old reckoning by song and blood, and the new arithmetic of balance and loss. And as the ring's circle caught light and swallowed it like some strange moon, the oldest of the watchers bent their heads and prayed that the world might yet choose its own shape before it was too late. He stooped into the throat of the mountain as one stoops into a beast's mouth, and the mountain answered him. Fire that had lain like dry memory flared to life, rivers of iron ran, and the very breath of Arda became a hammer. Around him, the air trembled with old names, with the songs of smiths who had not spoken since the days when Aulis still wrought. The Titan moved with the slow, inevitable motion of an elemental law. His steps were measured as if two worlds had made treaty in his bones. In that hollow, where light was molten and gravity seemed to bend to purpose, he set his design upon the world. The metal accepted him and would not relent. He drew from folded places, things stolen from other ages and other spheres. A stone that trapped starlight, a shard that remembered thunder, a glass that had kept a man's scream. He placed these in the crucible and named them aloud without saying their names. For to name is to command, and command is a sort of dying. His voice rolled through the caverns like a bell turning into a wave. Sparks rose and wrote sigils on the black air. Each rune was a vow and a law. The ring was no mere circlet of metal. It took shape as a thing of intent, a girdle for power that could weave wills into form. He tempered it with the world's own blood. He plunged the red edge of his will into the molten flow and bled a cold necessity across the surface. Balance, he said in his head, the way a god might say a prayer. Balance meant erasure and mercy measured in halves. He sought to bind abundance to scarcity, life to death, hunger to satisfied emptiness. The metals drank his meaning and were altered. The ring took from him not only geometry and composition, but a mind mirror of purpose. It learned his reasons and made them part of its circuit. There came a moment when the forge was silent save for the beating of a heart that was not wholly his. The crucible sang. Shapes moved in the glass like presences, some were other will seeking to be known. For a time, 1,000 voices jostled at the edge of the metal, old powers and nameless things, the weave of valor song and the whisperings of lesser spirits folded like cloth. The Titan listened, not that he hoped for counsel, but because in listening he could discover the points where resistance was least. He plied patience and pressure until the threads of potential knotted into one ring. The ring bore witness to more than one hand. It remembered mountain, sea, and star. It bore the memory of forges before Iluvatar's silence and of smiths who had fed the world's hunger. Where Sauron had made a mastering to bend the chieftains of men and lords of elves, this ring was a calculus of dominion. It was forged to reweave fate itself, to cut threads clean where they tangled, and to snip and splice the tapestry so that scarcity and plenty balanced exactly. It did not seek mere dominion, it sought order by subtraction, a grim auditor that would adjust life's ledgers. Far above, in the courtyards and towers of the wise, the new making was felt as if a bell had been struck under deep water. Elrond woke with his hair like frost, and a dream of iron tides. Galadriel's mirror, clouded with a shadow she had not yet named Gandalf, walking among the ridges of thought, felt a new weight upon the world's scale. Yet of all the wise, it was Sauron who first raised his head. He felt not with tenderness but with the old, cold hunger of a lord who finds a coin turned in his hand. A rival ring was an affront, a ring that would measure and cull life for balance, was a ring that might unmake his own claims or contest their purpose. He stretched his intent, a thin, black finger, tasting the warmth and cold of that forge, and registering a presence both like and unlike his own. The fortress of the dark was not quick to answer. Long practice had taught Sauron that haste makes weakness, and besides, the Titan's making sang a song in keys foreign to Mordor. For days the land quivered with undecision. Across the sea, the dwarves of the Blue Mountains, deep-set in stone and pipe smoke, felt the iron hum in their beards. They sent crafts and spies, secret as roots. The men of Gondor and the scattered folk of Arnor perceived nothing of smithies and stars, but they felt the practical consequences. The beasts that had been plumply abundant grew lean in some meadows and bountiful in others. Crops that, for generations, had been steady found themselves swaying like reeds in a new wind. Worry grew like fungus, where once there had been only habit. The elves, being long in hearing, perceived that this ring was not merely new but foreign to the old music. Galadriel lifted the veil and peered, and what she saw was not only the Titan but the vision he sought to enforce. A world trimmed with razor justice, a world where need was punished and plenty rewarded on some strict ledger. She saw cities emptied of needless wine and halls made sterile by counting, and in the corners, those who loved too much were driven to love less. Her pity burned and took the form of counsel, and in her counsel she named what must be done to those who would answer. The forging was both an omen and an opening. Aragorn, in Hunter's cloak, felt the stirrings as one senses a hunting beast's shadow moving across the grass. He set his face like stone and called men true. Gandalf, with staff and secret fire, gathered whispers in the wind and traced the pattern of balance that the Titan hoped to impose. This is not dominion by fear, the White said, nor dominion by glamour. It is counsel turned to an instrument it will not take by whim but audit what lives, and where scarcity must be, it will make it so. His counsel was blunt and terrible, and he warned that an instrument so efficient would be merciless. But there was an argument among the free peoples, for some thought that any hand steadier than chaos might spare many lives. Within the mountain, when the last chill of the metal sang down its spine, the ring set itself free of the hammer. It was small as a coin and blackened like a fossil from the sea. But when it turned in the light, it shone with a color that was not on the palantiri nor in the deepest cry of an augury. Runes breathed along its band, runes older than any tongue now living, yet their speech had margins where new letters of alien calculus had been wrought. Thanos lifted it in both hands and felt, with a clarity that was like pain, the mesh of destinies. He saw threads bundling into bundles, saw where abundance gathered like water in some bowls as other bowls were emptied. He did not laugh or weep. He weighed, with the same slow justice that had moved him from star to star. He resolved that with this ring he would make an accounting. He placed it upon his finger. The world did not kneel, rather it rebalanced as a scale finds its fulcrum. The tide of birds shifted their flights a degree hence, a spring in the vale of Anduin ran clearer and less, giving water to some roots and denying it to others. The effect was arithmetic, subtle at first and then not. Where a village had once fed 100, it might now feed 80, but those 80's children grew strong with a steadiness that others envied. Where a city had wasted, it found thrift and renewed stores. It was a terrible and logical beauty, clean, hungry, and inevitable. The ring, however, was not a mere tool. It was an eye and a will. The longer it sat upon his hand, the more it whispered of its own preferences. It liked balance in ways he did not fully intend. It disliked anomalies. It began to suggest changes, small at first, nudges that would make the accounting simpler. An animal here, a crop there, a sickness to close one ledger, and a bountiful birth to open another. Thanos, who had measured whole populations with the cold instruments of his mind, found himself both master and student. The ring taught him the patterns it favored and the prices it demanded. It cupped his thought and turned the marrow of his intentions like a potter's wheel. Outside, the wise debated. Some feared the Titan more than the ring, others feared the ring more than any Titan. Voices rose in halls of lore and treaty, even in dark places servants whispered.